Hello and welcome to another episode of Walking with Walfinch. We're here at the IFA, the International Franchise Association's annual convention in Las Vegas. The Vegas series, here we go.
Go, go, here we go. Go, go, now here we go. Now, go, go, here we go.
You ain't never ever seen nothing like this.
Go, go, here we go. Go, go, now here we go. Now, go, go, here we go.
You ain't never ever seen nothing like this.
Never have you ever seen something like me.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Walking with Walfinch. Today I've got Taj from Leasecake. Nice to have you here, buddy.
It's good to see you, Amrit. Pleasure.
Thank you. And so tell me, what is Leasecake?
Leasecake is lease and location management made easy for multi-unit operators, franchisors. The bigger brands realize that they need a platform in order for them to scale.
Yeah.
And protecting their real estate risk and reducing the chances that they could potentially lose a location is absolutely paramount. But beyond that, as we have 40,000 locations on our platform, probably 70% of our customers are PE backed.
Is that right?
Yeah, and if you
7%? 70%?
Yes,
Wow.
and so it's just a reaffirmation of the company that I founded 7 years ago.
Wow.
But our team is very focused on listening to our customers, building what they need to help them focus on building their empire. Right?
Wow. And so the private equity is backing the franchisee or the franchisor, or both in this situation?
Both. But if you look at, say, Jersey Mike's, they're a customer of ours with 3,000 locations.
Yeah.
Brought them on board, I think in September. Blackstone announced their acquisition for $8 billion. $8 billion with a B. And then Tropical Smoothie, a customer as well. Blackstone acquired them for $2 billion. But the story goes on and on. There are so many of our customers, if you start to connect the dots, you can see that the private equity is very active and they're very bullish about what's going to happen in 2025 because they invest in growing concepts, in growing brands that really understand the unit level economics.
And I think you were saying that you know Alicia Miller, the author of Big Money.
Oh, she's fantastic.
She's very
Everybody
cool.
on our team is reading her book, Big Money in Franchising. And everyone on our team is reading her book, Big Money in Franchising, and she's just a phenomenal asset to the industry because I think, frankly, what has been missing is the story of how companies and how brands and how legacies are truly built.
Yeah.
Right. This is one of the greatest countries, as well as the UK.
Yeah, as well as the UK. Hey, you know.
In the world. And if you just kind of follow the model, people are looking for what's that next breakout?
Yeah.
What's the next idea that's going to hyper accelerate? Like Wallcliff.
Yeah. Walfinch, but hey, you know. So,
like Walfinch.
yes, yeah. So I find that whole kind of private equity world really interesting because I think the activity that private equity has in the US is a lot more present than what we've got in the UK within the franchising space. I think it is absolutely there, but often it is with businesses that started in the US and have mastered out in the UK. But actually more and more, I think that is the direction of travel. When I was talking to, I met Alicia Miller actually at the IFA last year, but then we got together on a chance trip. We were in New York at the same time,
Oh, right.
and so we grabbed a coffee and kind of caught up. She's just phenomenal, you know. And having read her book, I just think, gosh, you know, it's really very interesting thinking about what's happening in the space. So and it wasn't always like that, I think.
For sure. I mean, if you let's just look at Jersey Mike's, for example. Peter Cancro, when he joined, it was 50 years ago, I think almost to the year, this year, where they've got now 3,000 locations. And you do this by executing just really judiciously on training and execution and really understanding your numbers. You don't just grow for growth's sake.
Yeah.
And I think that's what larger investors are looking for. It's not just the growth story, kind of churn and burn and flip it, but it's what are the brands that have staying power?
Yeah. And that is really interesting, isn't it? The staying power piece. And that is where, that is, making private equity interested as a franchisee as well, because I think, certainly I've not really come across that very much. Before I read Big Money,
Yes.
that would have been news to me. And after I read that, and I was like, my God, private equity are coming in and buying franchisee locations and operating them.
100%.
I mean, that is just something else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the makeup of your franchisees, they're high net worth. They understand their math. They know how to scale and grow.
Yeah.
But what might be holding them back is the right kind of capital.
Yeah.
And if you find that right kind of capital partner, whether it's private equity, family offices, or just the right kind of mix of someone that really wants to get into the space, there's a host of private equity folks that focus on that SMB market, if you will, that want to invest in franchisees, for sure.
And so what does that look like? I mean, that relationship, in your experience? I mean, I know that you're coming at it from a slightly different angle, but what have you seen that relationship look like?
Well, I'd say relationship is a pretty broad way to look at it. I mean, there's private equity, there's transaction advisors, there's buy, sell side, there's investment banks. Everyone that is trying to figure out how to invest in the right brands, close a deal, get smarter and faster, better opportunities out there, they all recognize, if you're an investment banker, you know that your client probably needs a solution for an M&A type of due diligence effort. So that's one aspect of how Leasecake fits into that model. You want to make certain, as an investment banker, or on the buy side or the sell side, that the transaction goes through. So there's a whole host of different actors in the PE world.
Wow.
Yeah.
And have you seen a scenario where private equity are interested because of the technology that a franchise has backed, or not been interested because there isn't a sort of an automated technology?
Well, you're hitting on something that is absolutely, I guess maybe smart franchisors are picking up on it, but from 10, 15 years ago, everyone understands that there's real estate risk to find a great location, right? That's always been the case, and it's probably even harder now in the last 2 to 3 years. It's certainly in the US. But it's even harder to find and compete for MUMBOs, multi-unit, multi-brand operators, because everyone wants them.
Nice.
Everyone is looking for that. If you look at Rourke Capital, we've got thousands of locations of Rourke Capital's locations on our platform. And for them, if you look at Inspire Brands specifically, they recognize that their multi-unit, multi-concept, multi-brand operators are on the front lines to find next space.
Yeah.
If I'm opening a Dunkin', I can open a Baskin Robbins, or know where there's a B-Dub Go, there's an opportunity there. So you can create this closed ecosystem where the brand feeds on itself within the parent company of Inspire.
Wow, nice.
I told you I was going to run out of breath. You got me doing a lot of the talking. This is walking and talking with Walfinch.
Hey, you're doing a wonderful job. It's we're all about an active lifestyle.
I love it. I love it. Let's not do this on a jog, though.
No, well, that's fair enough. Nobody wants that, right? But so your history, your experience has been in as a finance director.
So yes, I was a chartered accountant, a CPA for 15 years. I was fortunate to work with Disney for a decade as an Imagineer.
Wow.
Building lots of large-scale projects and business launches. But it's fascinating because I never really was my calling.
Yeah.
And after 10 years, we launched Disney Cruise Line. I was employee number 20 there,
no
if they even have employee numbers. And then I decided to leave after 10 years and joined a small tech company. And what I found is, probably just much like you, the greatest joy is listening to problems in the market from customers, from different prospects, and say, how do we solve them? How do we solve them with technology?
Yeah.
Building solutions that matter, not just dreaming up something, some idea, and saying, let's I hope people buy this.
Yeah.
And that's frankly, the foundation story of Leasecake. It's built for restaurant operators, retail-based service operators, medtail.
Yeah.
If you want to put, Walfinch kind of underneath that umbrella of, social care.
Yeah.
We serve lots of different markets with people that are wanting to build those empires.
And when a franchisee, ground level, is looking at their numbers, how does the information you've got help them?
Sure. Well, I would say that's probably part two. Part one is a franchisee that signs leases, that knows that they've got a great location. Chances are they're not real estate experts.
Yeah.
And what we are able to do is surface all that key information, not just the dates and the dollars in a real estate lease, but also the details. The details of critical clauses, penalties, provisions that chances are people overlook until they step on that landmine, until there's a problem. So, at the end of the day, when you take that information that's usually trapped in a SharePoint server or a Dropbox or in an Excel spreadsheet, you surface that in a very easy to use, beautifully designed, and software that really works for you and not the other way around.
Oh, that's very cool.
So
Taj, in fact,
That's
it's a bit of the accent there.
It's
right?
okay.
My brother-in-law was called Taj.
okay,
you're called Taj.
You can call me Taj. It's all right.
So Taj, a slight gear shift, and we're going totally off script here, but I've got something that I find really interesting, and I want to talk to you about it and see whether you resonate. So I've been a franchisee and now a franchisor, and been in the market since about 2012. And really, as a franchisor, both in the UK and coming out to the US, I find it really interesting that, people of an Asian background, it's not really, I don't see many Indian, Asian faces in franchising on either side of the pond. How does that kind of, is that fair to say, do you think?
I would.
As a franchisor, I'm saying.
I see. As a franchisor, I think that's changing, which is great. Certainly, as a franchisee, there's a great deal of diversity.
Yeah. No, as franchisees, I think actually, if I look at the makeup of home care franchisees, in my space in the UK, hugely diverse sector.
Yeah.
And actually, it probably attracts people from, sort of first generation immigrants and so on, more so than not, I would say.
Yeah.
And so, but I find it really interesting that, and actually it's a really weird thing for me as well. Like, when I was
franchisor.
As a franchisor, when I was telling my folks I'm going to become a franchisor, and they're like, "What the hell is that?" And it's really quite interesting. And I never have a situation really that I have many other Asian peers really that I can ask that question to. And I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on it.
Well, I'd say the numbers are growing. I think there's a great deal of success amongst the franchisee community, and the more locations they have, they realize that, hey, you know what, I want to be either a master licensor or take a step and potentially buy a brand that's complementary to what they have already. Yeah. So, I think going back to some of the numbers, why a franchisee would care about, let's say, real estate as they scale up and look to become a franchisor. Most franchisees, they have a number that they typically target when it comes to the rent spend, right? What's your lease cost per year? Yeah. And you might want to target, say, 4 to 6%, but over time, it starts to get out of whack, either because of their rent steps or your sales numbers aren't quite in line. That's another part of where we could potentially help is the percentage rent leases. I don't know to what extent they're prevalent in the UK, but you always, once you hit that cap, what's the reporting requirement? How often do you do true ups? And it's quite a painful exercise. Yeah.
And so you think 4 to 6% feels like a sort of relatively sensible number to sort of put your lease rents?
I would say it very much depends on the category. Like there might be full-serve restaurants or traditional retail concepts that can afford a much higher number. But in the QSR restaurant space, that's generally what we hear is people wanting to start with that number. Yeah. But it obviously can quickly get out of scale.
And so you're saying it gets out of scale because of the sales piece?
It can get out of scale. Let's say it's not a sales-based or an income-based lease. It's something as silly as you signed a lease 20 years ago, a 10-year lease with, let's see, 2 5-year options. Now you're into the second group of 5-year options, and those rent steps that you thought were nothing. Oh, I don't have to worry about paying $20 per foot or 30 to 40 because that's so far down the road. Before you know it, you might be locked in.
Yeah, and then it's there. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, and so making sure that people have their eyes wide open, looking at the data that we have in our platform. What's the norm for the base lease term, for example? We're starting to see a little bit of contraction just because risk is absolutely paramount. Because of, certainly in the U.S., it's really hard to find retail space.
And so that number feels right for retail. What do you think that number ought to be on?
You're gonna put me on air to quote numbers. I would say first in the QSR space and the restaurant space, those are good numbers to start. Will you always get them in every location? No, you won't.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
But you have to make sure you have a target.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point. It's having some sort of metric scale to work towards, right?
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you're shooting blind. And I think for me, the whole concept of franchising is very much around saying this is what the ideal looks like.
Sure.
What's the closest we can get to that?
Yep. Yep. It's like never fall in love with a space.
Yeah.
Because the details need to get hashed out over the following 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
Right. Never fall in love with a house because you just never know what might happen.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's very funny when we were looking for our new house a few years ago. This is a conversation I was having with my wife, and it was like, hold on, let me just work with this guy and see if I can hammer him 20% because I'll like it if it's cheap enough, and if we'll get the right deal here, and and it's really interesting because you can then start to do all the other stuff, and you're going to pull the kitchen out, and you're going to invest in it. Very
Factoring
much the same
all this.
Sure. Commercial leases, right? You're going to spend loads of money on it, even if someone previously has set the kitchen in a certain way, and your chef wants a sink on the other side and all that jazz, and it's really kind of saying, well, have I factored all of those costs in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And do you think franchisors tend to do a good enough job in sort of really talking about that part of it? And what else could franchisors be doing to support?
I would say it goes back to closure mitigation, because what you just touched on reminded me of several stories. The stories are there might not be a huge build-out required for a concept to go in, because the prior concept might have been a smoothie operator.
Yeah.
And if they lose their lease, it's so easy for a competing smoothie operator to come in, take it over, and just reskin it, and then lo and behold, they've got kind of that captive audience again. So what can franchisors be doing better is being much more cognizant of the risk, and also they're very much aware of what the P&L hit is, or actually what the top line hit is when they lose a top performing location. But it's almost embarrassing to not know which one is at potential risk in a 2, 3, 6, 1 year lookout.
Yeah.
And it's more than just the renewal option date. There's a whole series of provisions that a landlord will sneak in or look for any condition to tell you that your lease is out of compliance.
Right, gosh, yeah. And so, the way I usually sort of wrap these podcasts is by asking people, what do you think, if you were advising somebody on how to drive their business towards $1 million, what would be your advice? Having done the cycle yourself, what would be your key advice?
Oh wow, there's so many. Some of them are absolutely tangible with technology. Depends on the kind of business. Certainly you need to bring in guests, have them spend higher spend per transaction, if you will.
Yeah.
If it's a restaurant, you can find companies that do that, market and digital menus. But the other thing that multi-unit operators, that really strong ones, get is it's a people business. You need to find and you need to attract and retain the best in the business. That there are people that move from one brand to the next, looking for the next opportunity. Yeah. And I think, end of the day, it's always about the people, finding the right talent that can help you scale up and grow.
That is wonderful advice. Yeah. Thank you so much. a real pleasure to have you on board, Taj. Thank you so much. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Walking with Walfinch. And I hope you've got loads out of that. Really enjoyed that.
He's the guy.
Really wonderful.
Take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.